Welcome back to What's in a Game. It's been a bit since we've last gone live and talked about the NBA, but with the NBA Finals on Thursday, it's time for a finals preview. The Mavs finished out their series versus the... Wait, who did they play? It's been so long.
They played the Timberwolves.
Oh, yeah. I forgot that team
Oh yeah,
existed.
those guys. Will is such a
Um,
hater. I respect it.
I did enjoy seeing them lose, but now that we have the final stage set, how are you feeling?
I definitely feel like a bit of that man, it should have been the Nuggets, but
Oh
also
yeah.
the sort of instant like reflexive like response to that for me internally is also like I hope they're feeling that too.
Hmm.
Especially after seeing this Mavs Wolves series. Not that the Mavs would have been easy. I definitely don't think it would have been a 5 game series against us, even if the Mavs had won. But it really does show how important matchups and margins are in today's NBA because I think that in the past you could have had a team that maybe is a bad matchup for you, but they're not totally good enough in terms of overall quality to fully exploit that. And so like the better team would kind of just win on that quality standard alone. And you could say that maybe the Wolves were this like bad matchup for us last year, at least for Jokic. And even I think he played better against the Wolves this year than he did last year in terms of like his efficiency and all that. And part of it was like he had that wrist injury in 2023, or he had the wrist tape because it's kind of a lingering injury, but that messed up his touch. This year, the Wolves were a lot better, especially at consistently pressuring our defense. Like I was thinking about this when you asked me in our last episode about the Suns versus the Wolves, right? Like the Suns should have been a bad matchup for the Wolves, at least offensively, right? Now, they would have had issues defensively because I think the Wolves are a bad matchup for them in that respect too. But you didn't see them be able to consistently exploit their advantages offensively because they're not a good enough team at that thing that would make them that bad matchup for their opponent. It at least should have been, if they were a better team, a more competitive series, even if the Wolves still would have come out on top. And that's the sort of thing I'm taking away from these playoffs is like there's this dial that a team has to turn when it comes to their sort of overall quality, their specific matchup advantages that make them difficult for other teams, and then how good they are at exploiting that matchup advantage uh, when it comes to, you know, being competitive in the playoffs. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm glad
that's
we're
Grace's
starting this with
philosophy
the...
corner.
Yeah, it's cool we're starting with the Nuggets perspective to start out the show. I know a lot of fans and hopefully the players, like you're saying, were thinking something similar, that they were confident that they could have beat the Mavs, or if they just had held in on to that 20 point lead, that they would have beaten the Mavs. But I think if you're, a professional NBA player, you have to have that confidence that you can beat anybody, which kind of works against us at times because you then don't beat the Spurs before the playoffs start because you don't care about where you're seated and you don't care about who you're going to play. Whereas if we didn't play the Timberwolves, which provided a lot of difficult hurdles for us, we could have maybe gone further than we did. But based on how we kind of looked and how bad some of our players were playing, I doubt we beat the Mavs, to be honest. But it doesn't really matter too much thinking about it. But it's a fun discussion to have, I suppose. But now we have the Mavs versus the Celtics, where some of these matchups and strengths and weaknesses will come into play. So we're here to talk about some of those. We've kind of broken it up into players and what they might be seeing on both ends of the floors. Obviously, each team's stars are going to be very important and how the series is going to go. just like any other series. It's accepted that Luka is the best player in this series, but that doesn't always mean the team with the best player is going to win, because the Celtics are a very complete team and they haven't really been tested in ways that I think the Mavs will. So that is going to be fun to finally see the Celtics have to mix up what they're doing every so often, as opposed to just kind of keeping things the same and executing better, is mostly the adjustment that they make. So let's get started on it. We're first going to start with Luka Doncic. We're going to see how they're going to guard him, which I imagine will change from game to game. Why don't you start us off, Grace, and give us some of your thoughts on that and what you're looking for?
So when you talk about Luka being the best player in the series, my mind immediately goes to whether Boston can make sure that he doesn't play like the best player in the series, right? I
Yeah.
think that in round two, Jokic was pretty undeniably the best player in that series, but he wasn't able to consistently hit his ceiling. I would argue that game five was really the only game where he was playing indisputably, like on a one game basis, like the best player in that series. And part of that is because of the Wolves defense. Now, the Celtics are probably going to have, regardless of how Luka plays, the at least the third through fifth best player in the series, even if Luka goes supernova. If Jason Tatum is the best player in that series, or if Jaylen Brown is the best player in that series in terms of play, then the Celtics will win. And I actually think that the Celtics can probably win even if Luka is the best player in that series, right? Because they
Yeah.
have that sort of 3 through 5 advantage.
Hmm.
Now, when it comes to the Mavs offense, because that's where Luka's bread and butter is, right? He plays point guard. He brings the ball up the floor almost every possession. Although we did talk about how in the Wolves series in particular, he got off ball a lot more, and having Kyrie in the rotation on the team helps to make that a more viable option while keeping the potency of that offense. Having Jaden Hardy come off the bench also helps with that, although I have questions about whether Jaden Hardy is going to be a good matchup for this particular series, just because of all the ways that Boston likes to pick you apart defensively. The two ways that Luka is probably going to attack in this series are in pick and roll and in isolation. One of the things that really stood out to me in the tape from particularly the regular season game, which was after the trade deadline, I believe it was March 1st. This was a blowout win by Boston, but the game was stayed pretty competitive, sort of deep into the third quarter, and then Boston ran away with it.
Yeah,
In
the
that
Celtics
game,
got 138 points in that game,
yeah,
which is
that
pretty
was
crazy to
I
think
wasn't
about.
particularly impressed with the defense from either team in that game, to be honest. I
Yeah.
made a note of this that through three quarters, the score was 90 to 102, I believe. Yeah. So neither team was really like locking down at that point. This I believe was during a time when Dallas had sort of had some momentum after the trade deadline going into the All-Star break. Gafford and PJ Washington were playing really well. Coming out of the All-Star break, the Mavs actually hit quite a slide. I think they went on something like a 6-game losing streak. And it's not that Boston came out like hot throughout the All-Star break. They just sort of maintained their consistent like
Hmm.
winning 75% of their games sort
Hmm.
of cadence throughout the entire season, and they were just still on that roll.
Hmm.
And I don't think that Dallas had fully leaned into that defensive identity yet. There were some differences in the rotation, say in that game, than in the postseason. But with respect to how Luka played, one of the things I found interesting was it was Lively starting. That Luka Lively pick and roll is one of their favorite sort of pet actions. Makes sense with Lively as the lob threat. And Boston was mixing up matchups from the very first possession of the game. They had Jaylen Brown on Luka, they had Tatum on Lively, and they put Kristaps on PJ Washington. And I found it interesting that the very first possession of the game, that was the sort of defensive alignment for Boston. I think Drew was on Kyrie, and Derek White was on. Josh Green was starting then, not Derek Jones Jr. Because Tatum was on Lively, Boston was able to switch that pick and roll. But Luka didn't go to the Lively pick and roll for that first possession. He brought PJ up to screen so that they could pull Kristaps into the action. And that was pretty consistently what the Mavs went to throughout the game whenever Kristaps was on PJ or somebody else, but he was usually sort of roaming off of PJ. The Mavs were just like, okay, we won't go to our bread and butter thing with Lively. We're just consistently trying to pull Kristaps into the action so that he either has to guard in space or we can get two on the ball, that kind of thing. Boston in that game didn't do a lot of putting two on the ball with Luka, at least not up top. There was a lot of late help in the second half of this game because what ended up happening is Luka was torching Drew in pick and roll. Luka's too strong for Drew, especially coming off of screens. Like Drew basically has no chance. And whenever Drew or again Jaylen Brown tried to go under on those screens, Luka was pulling up from deep, and he happened to be hitting that game for the most part. Now, I mentioned Drew, even though Jaylen Brown started on Luka, because on that very first possession, Luka pulls, I think it was Kyrie, because Drew was on Kyrie, pulls Drew's guy into the action to get the Drew switch, and then runs the pick and roll with PJ to bring Kristaps into that action. And I just found that interesting. First possession of the game. Boston's already sort of got like a playoff level defense. We're just mixing up matchups to like kind of confuse the thing that you like to do the most. And Luka opts to put who is supposed to be their best perimeter defender, although I've detailed some of the shortcomings that I think Drew has, and I didn't necessarily see this as one, but pulls him into that pick and roll. He's supposed to be a really good screen navigator as well. And I believe PJ gets a layup out of that, if I recall correctly, on that first possession. Or no, Luka actually scored. It was a very short, like a 4-foot shot, like right at the rim that he ends up getting because Kristaps is playing back to prevent the dump off to PJ. Luka could go after Jaylen Brown, and he did at different points in the game in different ways. Because he had him as his primary defender, but he wanted to get switched onto Drew and then to put him through that screening action. And I just found that pretty interesting because I don't actually see Jaylen as a worse screen navigator than Drew, or sorry, as a better screen navigator than Drew. But maybe I'm just wrong about that, whatever it is. And so that was on that very first possession, there were just like layers and layers on that. And so I was wondering what you think about why Luka goes after that Drew switch, because he did it throughout the game, but happening on the very first possession, it definitely stood out to me.
Well, I mean, Drew's always been thought of as a versatile defender who can play up positionally on defense. I was going to ask you too, which we can get into this later, but who the Celtics might start on Luka, because I think the conventional thinking right now, at least what I'm hearing from a lot of people, is they're going to start with Drew on Luka. I just am unsure, based on what I just saw Luka do, that that's a good idea, because Drew, I don't know. I just don't know how Drew's going to hold up with Luka just bullying him. Maybe Drew would be better to be off ball if Luka likes that matchup, because you don't want to just hand it to him just by placing Drew on him, unless Drew has some level of defense where he's going to, make it hard for Luka. It also kind of seems like there's this choice, just like with Jokic, where it's the whole making him a scorer versus a passer thing. And I think Boston isn't like going to consistently commit to any one coverage on Luka. They'll mix up coverages because they're so good defensively and they have good defenders across the whole roster. So I just think they're a smarter team too than some other teams in the Western Conference. I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
saying the Celtics are a good team. It's not like a slight on to
Yeah.
West teams, but they just have the ability to consistently mix up coverages because of like personnel and such because they have strong guards. I know that they're going to be thinking about who's going to be on which player based on the actions because they're going to like try to predetermine who may be coming out of the switch because they like to switch stuff. So that's just mostly what I'm thinking about in terms of the Drew Holidays. How much do you want him on Luka versus? I mean, if they think Drew can guard him, maybe they'll just plan on him being switched out onto Luka in actions if he's not guarding him. But we'll see if Luka can punish that and how badly it works in game one.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of ways that Dallas can punish Boston for mixing up the matchups positionally like that. But my first thought is that they're probably just going to put Jaylen Brown on Luka to start the game because they did in that regular season game, and they pretty much kept Jalen as the primary matchup on Luka, like at least the initial matchup on Luka throughout the game. And you talk about sort of not wanting to give up the switch,
But that's like the Celtics
but
identity.
that's the Celtics. Like they like to switch. They even had a couple of possessions where they switched Al Horford onto Luka. On one, he got cooked. On another one, they got a stop. I thought it was like okay defense, but it was basically the same kind of shot that Luka. He always likes to go to that step back when he's got a big on him.
Hmm.
And I don't think that Al did anything like particularly good there. But I think that Boston is going to try to just live with Luka's scoring. One of the things that Joe Mazzulla talks about a lot when it comes to why they switch so much and why they like to pack the paint and basically maintain a lot of their sort of base defensive coverages is you always open another door when you mix things up. And there are ways that Dallas can punish some of the things that Boston is doing, some of the smaller things that they're doing to mix things up, like putting Tatum on Lively. That's a size disadvantage. That's an athleticism disadvantage. I did see in that game, like Tatum broke up like a couple of lobs, but having to do that consistently, I just don't really trust that. Plus, offensive rebounding, right? And that's another reason that Boston doesn't want to put two on the ball is that that sort of augments the potential offensive rebounding disadvantage that they could have if they were to just sort of deal with the mismatch between like Lively and Tatum or Gafford and Tatum because they like to put Tatum on the centers. That was another thing about this game is that Gafford, I'm not even sure if he played in the second half. There was a lot of Maxi Kleba at the 5 minutes, and we can talk about that a
Yeah.
little bit. But I think that Boston overall is going to live with Luka's scoring. They pretty much did, and it was fine for the first half of this game. In the second half, that we're actually able to run away more with it when they were able to force the ball into some of the role players' hands. But I thought Dallas got a lot of great looks in this game. So it's not that they weren't able to create good offense. It was more their defense that suffered, and we'll talk about that when we get to the rest of this matchup. Or just guys missing shots, like and I don't mean that as someone who is just like, "Oh, yeah, like a semi-contested 3, like, that's still a good shot," whatever, like, these were, like, wide open looks that guys had, like, tons of time to have been set up for, and I mean, like, Kyrie was missing open looks. He got a lot of, great looks in this game, but we'll talk about his matchups, um, in a bit. With Luka specifically, I think Boston's gonna live with Luka being efficient against basically all of their defenders because in this game I saw Luka cook everyone except Tatum, and even Tatum got in some ways in various sequences of this game. Now, the downside of that is that as for Boston, is that as the game and in particular as the series goes on, I think Luka's really good at learning individual defenders.
Hmm.
And I think that Boston's got a lot of really great defenders, but they're not like I don't think any of them are game breakers. Like, no, there's no
Yeah.
like Draymonds on here. There's no, what Jaden McDaniels should have been in the last series, but there's like three high level defensive things that they do well. Each of them has like one or two high level things that they do well defensively. But if you put them in a position where they can't utilize that strength, then you can kind of neutralize that defensive impact. And I think Luka is best positioned as a singular player to exploit that, at least within this matchup. I think there are other holes within Boston's defense, but they won't matter in this matchup. They're not facing like a highly skilled like
Yeah.
post up big, or that kind of thing. But
Yeah, which
it
I'm
is
a little bit
clear
concerned
that
about.
you're concerned about that, but you want
For the
Boston to win.
Mavs. Like
Oh
I'm
yeah,
just saying, like the Mavs, they don't like Lively and Gafford aren't post up specialists. So
right. I mean, it's
Luca's
one of
gonna
the
look.
reasons that they can get away with putting Tatum on Lively,
Yeah.
right? In a way that it's not like Lively's going to be on the ball a ton, and when he is, it's going to be to set somebody else up that Tatum can just switch onto.
Yeah.
I do think that there are ways that Dallas can punish these switches that they really didn't in this game, like especially when it comes to miscommunications which Boston I think is a team that communicates well defensively on the whole, but in the playoffs I've seen a lot of communication breakdowns,
Hmm.
particularly on defense from them. So, for example, slipping switches, faking more screens in order to just kind of keep those defenders on their toes, the ones that are on ball on Luka, like, what am I doing? Which way are we going? I personally expect the Mavs to figure out more ways to get Lively more involved in the offense, Lively and Gafford, because you can't just like let Boston keep you from getting your favorite thing, which is lob dunks, right? Anything that Lively got in that game was just in transition. But I think there are ways
Yeah.
to exploit Boston's defense even in the half court to still get that stuff. It's just a matter of sort of balancing, trying to attack a particular mismatch, which in that regular season game, it was like we want to keep going at Kristaps, try to get him guarding in space, keep making Dallas or making Boston guard that pick and roll versus the thing that you do best offensively is this two-man game between Luka and the bigs, the
Hmm.
vertical spacing big that can really sort of break whatever the other team is doing defensively, even if it's that vertical spacing and athleticism can sort of break a defense even when they did everything right on a possession.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is there times that Luca has shown in this postseason run that even when the defense is playing good defense, he still can get the lob because he's just such a good passer and such a good anticipator. And yeah, he can just put the ball in places that the defenders can't get it. It's very Jokic like, where he's giving his teammates the best chance to make the play. And I am interested to see how much they're able to do that despite whatever Boston's trying to do in covering that because it can still work. I don't think they're going to be able to do it as much as they were against some other teams because the Celtics are a sound defensive team and they switch a lot. I don't anticipate that they're going to be getting over and over and over again because I think they're going to make Luka, like you're saying, they're going to try to live with Luka mostly trying to score. And I think that their mindset coming into this series, at least early on, is to not let Luka let the other dudes get going, which may or may not work because it's weird because against the Wolves, I almost didn't want to see the Mavs or Luka pass because good things were just happening when he was having the ball. Because I don't know, he was just doing everything, and maybe Luka is just going to play so otherworldly in this series that he can get 4 games where his scoring is enough to let them win. But it does seem kind of far fetched. This is getting into a bunch of other stuff because I'm starting to think about Jaylen Brown and like how much effort is he putting on Luka on the defensive end when he also needs to be like an offensive workhorse. And we can get to that when we talk about the Jays specifically, but that's just where my mind goes to immediately in thinking about living with Luka as a scorer because it's like you want to make it tough on him, but you're just hoping you get 1 or a couple possessions here and there where Luka just like misses or something. And it's how much effort is that going to require on defense?
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing in this game is that I was not impressed with either team's defense in that regular season game, but Boston's transition defense in particular was really, really bad. I don't know how many points the Mavs got on the fast break officially, but it was just touchdown pass after touchdown pass off of missed baskets, off of made baskets. And that's something that the Mavs have consistently gone to in this postseason, to varying degrees of success depending on how well the other team was playing transition defense, just making sure that like they don't get the easy dunks. And Josh Green actually played a decent part of that, not because he was kind of running the floor with the ball, but he was able to make really good passes in transition. Like, he's a really good playmaker in transition. But let's talk about Luka isolation just a little bit, because I do think that one of the things Kidd might go to based on how he played that regular season game is Kleba at the 5. I don't know if it's going to work. Now, one of the things with that Kleba at the 5 look is that you don't get rim protection at all. And that, I think, has been Dallas's second biggest strength overall
Hmm.
in these playoffs. And in round 2, it was their biggest strength because they won that series against OKC on their defense, Lively and Gafford at the rim, stopping OKC from getting all their easy stuff, right? Shea was still scoring. He was still figuring out ways to like keep OKC in those games, even take leads sometimes, and they won a couple of those games. But the rim defense is what made it difficult on the opponent. When it comes to Luka's role in that, I think that because of the way that Boston likes to attack, they like to attack a lot of mismatches. Boston will probably try to put Luka in a lot of actions. Minnesota tried to do this a bit in that series, and I found it interesting that there were a lot of occasions where the Mavs started switching a lot, having Luka having Luka switch onto the bigs. He did that a couple of times in this regular season game onto Kristaps, but they're going to try to make Luka work defensively a lot, and they're probably going to have a bit more success at it than the Wolves did, because if you're just switching, say, Luka onto the big, then Kristaps in this case is a much more potent post-up threat than Rudy was, for example. Likes to stand out at three-point line. Luka's going to have to recover if they're doing like a hedge and recover kind of thing. That is also going to play into mitigating his offense personally.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about Luka's offense specifically in this matchup. Like, we all know he's
Yeah.
good. Boston knows
Yeah.
he's good. The Mavs know he's good. They know they need to at least slow him down, right? But I actually don't think that I think that the Celtics can still win this series even if Luka goes supernova. So I don't see slowing Luka down, especially because I don't think that any of their one-on-one defenders are going to be all that effective on him, especially as the series goes on. I don't think that it's gonna work. So I don't see it as an X factor, because I'm kind of penciling him in for a really good individual series with some drop off in efficiency, because Boston's gonna get like a few more stops. They've got like good defenders with good length. We're deep into the playoffs now. Everybody's a bit more fatigued, especially Luka, and Boston's going to try to fatigue him on defense as well.
Yeah, I think that's going to be important. A lot of even what in this initial discussion about Luca, I'm thinking a lot about the Celtics offense, and I'm thinking about the Celtics offense specifically and how this is going to affect Luca because, like you're saying, they're going to make him work. He showed flashes of good efforts on defense throughout the playoffs.
Yeah.
So we'll see how they do that with Luca. There's less options to kind of hide Luca, if that's the term you want to use, than the Wolves, where the Celtics have more people who can kind of like operate, I guess, on offense than the Wolves.
I mean, just like as a specific example on that, one of the Celtics like most efficient actions in the regular season was this Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis pick and roll. Because Jaylen can be a pull-up threat sometimes. He's a great downhill athlete, all that great pick and roll partner, and often Kristaps would pop, but sometimes he'd roll too. they actually had, because Jalen was on Luka, I don't know if this was a cross match or Mavs intentionally kind of had Luka on Jalen. They switched that action with Lively. KP is a post-up threat, but I'm not gonna sit here and like buy into all of this like KP as a dominant post player. Like he's really good at attacking solidly mismatches,
Hmm.
but I actually think that Luka held up against him decently, especially
Hmm.
when on these pick and pops, especially, he's pretty far out. And when you're just not letting him get deep position, then that shot's just going to be harder, right? And then Lively has held up on switches incredibly well throughout these playoffs. I mean, I think Jalen Brown got downhill on him once, but that was a really interesting way that the Mavs were also able to neutralize one of the Celtics' favorite, pet actions too. So I do think that Luka is going to play a role in making this a more interesting X's and O's series on both ends of the floor
Hmm.
because of how much switching Dallas likes to do and can do. Because when Luka's your point guard, you your lineup can just be a lot bigger uh, than normal, and so they end up being this really like decent sized wingy team that can also switch a lot like Boston does.
This is going to be a very fun series to watch if you're a huge Luca fan because it's like they're going to let him do stuff on offense and see how many shots in a row he can make, basically. And if you want to see how he is on defense, we're going to see him be tested. But we'll see how the Mavs mitigate that and what they do to help him out. But yeah, I mean, his fatigue level and his energy level is going to be a big factor because he's going to have to be at the top of his game consistently to make this a series. So yeah, is there anything else with Luca on defense you want to talk about, or anything else with him before you talk about Kyrie?
No, let's move on to Kyrie because I think he's really Dallas's X factor in this series. I talked about how we're basically penciling Luca in for like kind of historic numbers just because of his usage, and we'll see what the efficiency looks like. But when it comes to Kyrie, he's that second star. He was pretty instrumental in that finals as this explosive scorer. Not just we talk about these microwave scorers off the bench sometimes. Kyrie had generational performances in that 2016 finals, and he's capable of that. This season, he's scoring really well when he's on the floor. He's very efficient. The playoffs have been a bit of a different story. And going back to watch that game from the regular season, I was kind of expecting Kyrie to look a little bit better than he has in this playoffs because he's been facing some really good defenders, especially when it came to OKC, but also against the Wolves that have made him quite a bit more efficient, quite a bit more uncomfortable. But watching that game, he was not as efficient as I would have liked, but he was getting a lot of wide open looks. One of the things that I have noted throughout the playoffs is the limitations that Boston's perimeter defense has with shiftier guards. Kyrie is, like I've said before, I would call him the second shiftiest player in the NBA behind Shea. Now, in this game, it was also the case in isolation, in pick and roll. Kyrie was able to get to his spots, and even off of advantages created by the attention that Luka drew sort of later in possessions, because Boston wasn't not helping at all. It's just when Luka gets deeper into the paint, initiates a drive and kick, ends with a wide open sort of baseline fade away from Kyrie, maybe like a 12-footer, and then it's like way off. So maybe he was just off in that game, right? I don't because I didn't see anything in particular that Boston was doing to make those shots difficult on him. Like I said, a lot of them were wide open. He was missing threes. All of the Mavs were missing threes, particularly in the first half of that game. But he's able to get to his spots, and similar to how I talked about how like Bradley Beal could have been an X factor for Phoenix against the Wolves, because I kept seeing him consistently being able to like get to his spots, get to the rim, get to like good areas to make shots, and then not be able to make shots. I think that Kyrie is going to be in a similar position in this series. Now, there were some possessions where I'm like, why are you taking Derek White in isolation? Like, hunt out a better matchup, right? Because I think of all of Boston's defenders, Derek White's probably the best equipped to handle Kyrie.
Hmm.
But they really wanted Drew on Kyrie in that matchup, and I actually think, if he got switches with Jalen or Tatum, he was still able to outquick them because he just is. He will be the quickest player on the floor on any given night, and that will be his advantage. He won't be able to sort of bully some of these players like he did Nikhil Alexander Walker or sometimes Case and Wallace, although I think Case and Wallace has done the best job on Kyrie of anybody I've seen in these playoffs. And he's going to be a really important counter for those possessions when like Luka can't score literally every possession, right? Or attempt to score. He's going to need a breather, and they're going to
Hmm.
need to run things in a way that gets Kyrie in advantageous positions. But I think they're going to be able to do that. And it's going to be a question of, does Kyrie make his shots? Do you have any thoughts on Kyrie's offense in this matchup?
Yeah, I'm just interested to see how much he's used, like the balance of
Yeah.
the workload and how they're getting to it. Because, yeah, like he can just bring the ball up and run some stuff. But I just think about how aggressively they're going to try and guard him because if they want to try to limit the others and they're like living with Luka, doing everything and just working his ass off, how aggressively are going to try to get the ball out of Kyrie's hands? Because then it's getting back to Luka, who then the shot clock's down a little bit. It's less time for him to do stuff. I don't know. It's just interesting. Maybe Kyrie's gonna have a little ego and be trying to stick it to the Celtics and force too much. I don't know. Like we'll see how he's playing. He's been good lately. He did have that one bad game versus the Wolves when they well, I don't know if you'd classify it as bad. He just wasn't as potent when they finally put McDaniels on him and put Ant on Luca. So could the Celtics do something like that where Jalen's going to be on Kyrie and they just are kind of living with
Maybe.
whoever, letting Luca just do what he wants because he's going to do what he wants anyway? Is that better for them? I don't know. I wonder if they go with Drew on Luca and Jalen on Kyrie just to start game one, just to see, and see how it goes and then adjust later, or if they're just going to go into it with the mindset that Jalen's going to be on Luca all series until they're forced to do something different. I don't know. But I do think you're right that it kind of just comes down to, is he going to make his shots? He's a really creative finisher on the rim. Can, Porzingis and or Horford deter him at the rim? Can they get some stops on him when he's trying to finish? How's that going to look? I think there's more things you can do or hope for with Kyrie, as shifty and creative as he is, than you can with Luka, which, I mean, it's Luka, so there's not many who can compare to Luka in that regard. But otherwise, offensively, no, I'm looking just to see how they're guarding him.
I do think that from that regular season game, it did seem like they were trying to get the ball out of Kyrie's hands when Luka was off the floor, force the role players to make decisions and such. And they did a lot of lineups where it was like Kyrie and Dante Exum as the ball handler. Jaden Hardy didn't play in that. Maybe this is a bigger Dante Exum series just because of the size issues, right? Where they want someone else out there who can handle the ball, who can help Luka and
Hmm.
Kyrie get off ball, but they want someone with a bit more size who can make a bit more impact defensively. Although they did get Exum on skates a couple times in that game, and just like we saw Ant do in the Wolves series, but at least you kept the ball in front. I think that in those bench minutes, because this that regular season game did not have the regular rotation. You had Lively starting,
Yeah.
Gafford coming off the bench. Gafford didn't even play in the second half, or if he did, it was very limited minutes because they were playing Kleber at the 5. There were some limited minutes, especially in the first half, where they had Kleber at the 4, which I think is like kind of a potentially like a game breaker type lineup. One of the things that I've seen throughout this postseason that I did not see in that game is that Kyrie has a really decent chemistry with the bigs on this team. Really good at getting them the ball, whether it's via lob or sort of like really creative pocket passes, especially lobs. Like that vertical spacing threat is such a big, bailout variable on a possession. Like we all remember the one where Kyrie basically like fumbles the ball. It's the end of the clock. He almost drops it and sort of picks it up and then just kind of throws it up for Lively to dunk it over Rudy. I think that is also going to provide a similar outlet against this Boston defense whenever they do try to put two on the ball, because they do like to run pick and roll with the bigs in particular. And Jason Tatum's not always going to be on the floor to, put them there to just switch that
Hmm.
action and make things difficult, right? I think one
Hmm.
of the reasons that Jason Kidd tried more Kleba at the 5 minutes wasn't, I hope it wasn't for the defense because that was not that was not the answer.
No.
Was so that Luka and Kyrie had more space to operate in isolation. And I was surprised that Boston like basically gave it to them in those minutes. They were scoring just fine. It was really like again the defense that suffered in those lineups. I actually think that like Luka thrives more in that five outlook, at least offensively, than Kyrie does, because he can take guys in isolation, but I think he's just better as a pick and roll guard. He's more effective, more efficient as a pick and roll guard because he has
Yeah,
like
he's
those
smaller.
crafty hook shots. And yeah, and he's a good lob thrower with these bigs in particular. So I think that will be interesting, like that variable of when we're turning the dial to try to make things easier for Luca, are we potentially making things more difficult for Kyrie, and like is it worth it? Plus the question of the both ends of the floor.
That's
And
really what I
so
want to
yeah,
look at. I
yeah.
just think it's a good point.
That's one of the reasons I think that Dallas should, and they probably will, because they've basically maintained their core rotations throughout the entire playoffs, regardless of things that the other team is doing with their rotations, where you have Gafford starting Lively off the bench, trying to keep one of those guys on the floor at all times. I think that lob threat, rebounding, especially offensive rebounding, has been an important part of how the Mavs counter switches as well. And it'll be less effective against Boston because all their guys are good rebounders, but you're still switching your, big out onto the perimeter, for example, and pulling away one of the better rebounders on the floor, leaving Gafford or Lively to sort of feast off a potential missed shot, right? And so uh, that's another way that Dallas can punish switches, like we talked about, even if Boston is trying to mitigate some of those side effects of junk defense
Hmm.
by as much as possible. So defensively for Kyrie, while the Celtics will probably try to put Luka in as many actions as possible, at least in that regular season game, Kyrie was the one that they were attacking defensively a lot more. And it was mostly just like, let's try to seal this guy in transition, get a post touch for Jalen, get a post touch for Tatum, um, and that sort of thing. Some switches onto Kristaps that Dallas just kind of gave up. I don't know who Dallas wants to put Kyrie on as the primary, is the thing. Because in that game, whenever he did get switched onto Kristaps, he happened to be on Derek White. But I don't know that that was like like you have to like find this guy whenever you can and match up with him. And I don't know that it's the best fit for Kyrie, but there's not like another great one because Drew likes to play bully ball as well. It's one of the
I think
reasons I
Luca's going to
think
be on Drew.
I think so too. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I agree with that.
so I'm thinking, yeah, Kyrie must be left on Derek White.
On Derek White, right.
You know,
I actually have really liked what I've seen from Kyrie at the point of attack against these guards throughout the playoffs defensively. Like I really haven't had any like qualms with his defense. I think he's actually been pretty impactful. He had Shea as the primary whenever Derek Jones Jr. was off the floor, and I thought he did a pretty good job. The only times when Shea really sort of got him in terms of like, we let that happen was Shea sort of seals him a little bit deeper in the post, and then gets like a post fadeaway, which like it's basically Shea's like bread and butter shot, but without any help coming from any direction, right? But other than that, in terms of like face up situations, he can be really pesky because I do think that one of the strengths that the Celtics have had this year compared to last year is they have Derek White as their starting point guard. He is a much better decision maker than Marcus Smart. He's a better shooter than Marcus Smart. He's got like some three-level scoring chops, he can get downhill, etc. And he's involved in a lot of their favorite actions, especially like
I
the
know.
White Tatum stuff. And sometimes he runs the most pick and roll with Kristaps, whereas like a Jalen Brown or Tatum will run more like a pick and pop with Kristaps. So if you can disrupt that you can get rid of a lot of the Celtics' easy stuff. So Kyrie might end up having a more impactful series defensively than
Hmm.
anybody really thinks, because they think of the Celtics as like the Jays. And I think Jalen and Jason, especially Jason, helped the Celtics get their like tough shots. But I think Derek White and the actions that he runs with Tatum, with Kristaps, and the stuff he gets in transition help the Celtics get a lot of their easy points. And so if you can take those things away, and you've got, like, I think the way that Dallas' defense has thrived in these playoffs has been taking away easy points. I think their transition defense has been a lot better in the playoffs than it was in the regular season, just like by eye, because teams were just consistently getting runouts on them before, at least. And then it's just like, all right, who executes, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I want to see how smart the Celtics look and what shots they're hunting and how aggressively. They're a good 3-point shooting team, a good jump shooting team. So I always wonder if they're gonna just settle for stuff, or if they're gonna really try to find those easy points. But yeah, I don't think Kyrie's like a pushover on defense. He's good positionally, like sitting in driving lanes too. Maybe he'll, pre-switch with Luka or something, so he's not putting in as many actions or whatever it is. He's going to have to sacrifice a bit because I'm sure he knows Luka is the number one on this team. So he's going to have to really sacrifice and navigate screens because the Celtics love Derek White being in actions and they love Drew being in actions. You don't want him on KP or the Jays necessarily because he's a lot smaller. I just can't wait to see how the Celtics hunt him and how successful they are and what matchups they like. And
Yeah,
but
one of the things that I sort of joked about last season was like, you had all these fan bases like, why didn't they just hunt MPJ? Why didn't they just hunt Jokic in the pick and roll? Why didn't they keep hunting Jamal, etc.? And I'm like, sometimes having like too many huntable options could like play in your favor, because teams can get indecisive about like how
hmm
they want to attack you. And I
yeah,
think that while the Mavs have been this really good defensive team overall, especially in the playoffs, but since the trade deadline, by the numbers, at least the prevailing sort of sentiment around Luka and Kyrie is that they're cones on defense, etc. And like Luka's had his moments, especially in these playoffs, where he has not been as consistent defensively as Kyrie. But on the whole, I would say that like in 50% of the games or more, he was like fine. Like he was a pretty neutral on defense. And part of it is just like staying like engaged in the game. And Kyrie has, I think, been just kind of good throughout. I think that the Celtics, we as an NBA Twitter, clown on the Celtics a lot for their late game offense and all this stuff, because sometimes they get into this, they get sort of stuck on trying to hunt specific matchups. And
yeah,
that's the thing that happens at the end of these games. It's not that they're trying to run bad offense all the time. They're trying to hunt specific matchups and then have Tatum attack them in isolation, or sometimes have Jalen Brown attack them in isolation. And if they, get the double, then they get like the easy kick out and that kind of thing. But mostly it's like those guys trying to hunt the matchup, get the isolation. Part of the reason they get so deep in the clock is that when you're playing a good team, they're not just giving you the matchup that you want on one of these late game, for that other team defensive possession, right? A lot of teams like to play man to man. They would like to make sure that the guy they want guarding the guy that's going to take a shot is the guy guarding the guy that's going to take the shot, right? And it sort of, I think, sometimes throws them, them being the Celtics, because they haven't, like, teams haven't been doing that all game. They've been kind of giving them the matchups they want or guarding them in like a particular way. And so the fact that they have these two things that they can attack, and the Celtics are able to attack other mismatches in a variety of ways. For example, pulling the rim protector out of the paint, moving the ball around, and then having guys attack that way, etc. But especially late game, there are basically like two things, maybe three, that they like to go to, and they all involve Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown attacking like size mismatches. But if you get too deep in the clock, the shot just becomes more difficult. And you get too deep in the clock when the other team is working consistently to deny you that matchup. And so that I think will be an interesting dynamic for both Dallas and Boston to navigate, because sometimes you're just like, I'm just going to trust my guy to, defend this, even though like no one thinks they're a good defender, whether it's Luka or Kyrie. But other times they will just be like, well, let's get this, let's force them to make a decision. One of the stats from this game was, I think it was near the end of the fourth quarter, like the game was basically over. The Boston Celtics had 24 assists to only 3 turnovers in the second half of that game. So that tells you the state of Dallas's defense. Not
Hmm.
that it was bad, but it was. But also what they were doing wasn't forcing the Celtics to make a lot of tough decisions.
Yeah,
And
they're
I
going to
do
be
think that
much better this series.
yeah, I think that they will be better in this series. They've been better about that in the playoffs in general. So, despite the Celtics' vaunted 5-out spacing, like 5-out spacing only works if the other team respects your 5-out spacing. And I think that Dallas is probably going to do a couple of things to try to disrupt that for sure. And it's not like
Hmm.
they play 5-out all the time anyway.
Yeah. The Mavs, though, they're definitely going to have to be crisp on their rotations and such. They do like to try to sometimes get you in rotation. They have the personnel to do that. They love pick and popping, all that kind of good stuff. So I don't know that we've seen it. Obviously, the Wolves weren't quite like that. Maybe the Thunder were more similar in that regard. So maybe that's. I feel like the Thunder and Mavs series is more similar to what this one's going to look like.
Yeah.
Not quite, but it's probably the best comparison we have.
Just like kind of grimy. Maybe people are expecting a shootout and you don't get that for like half the series.
You already said it, and I was gonna save it for the others part, but like Derek Lively and them, even if they, you could punish switching theoretically with a good post up player or something like that, and even if Gafford and Lively aren't that kind of player, they can punish, like you said, on the glass. So I'm interested to see how often they're gonna rebound these tough Luka Kyrie shots. If they're gonna rebound over, Derek White or whoever it is that switched off and is in the paint now trying to rebound. So that's going to be a key for sure. But yeah, let's talk about the Jays now. Jaylen Brown has been very good. He was amazing in the last series. So wondering if that continues, if he's going to be kind of the leading scorer of the Celtics. He very well could be. Get us started on the Jays. Where do you first look at
Yeah.
them?
So I'm curious how Dallas chooses to guard Jason Tatum. I was talking to somebody yesterday about the fact that in both our regular season matchups, I believe. No, the first one in Boston, we had KCP on Tatum and we put Aaron Gordon on Jaylen Brown. And I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. But Tatum is bigger. But like he doesn't play bigger. Jaylen Brown is the one that plays the bully ball.
Hmm.
And in the second regular season game, I think he was kind of just cooking everybody on the Nuggets. But I thought KCP did a really good job of disrupting all of the stuff that Tatum likes to do. Right, like Tatum can still post him up. It's similar to what I talked about with Kyrie, except KCP is obviously a better defender. Like he can be like highly positive impact point of attack defender, but he just kind of bothers Tatum a lot. And I think Derek Jones Jr. can do a similar type of job where he's constantly denying him the ball off the ball. In those actions that he runs with Derek White, he can hedge and recover better and fight through those like Derek White screens more so that they're not giving up a switch or having to hedge as much, etc. Just because like Derek Jones Jr., he's a really good screen navigator in my opinion. And he's got even more length than KCP, so he can still bother some of the shots that maybe Tatum could have just like shot over KCP, etc. Now, just like with KCP, I do think that Tatum can bully him more. But to me, forcing Tatum to have to continuously score on the interior when he can get to the rim and he can finish easy shots, but he's not really great at finishing anything semi contested at the rim from what I've seen. Anyway, I don't know what the exact numbers are on that, but part of the thing with Boston's offense now is that they have all of these shooters constantly at the perimeter when like Tatum or Brown are getting downhill. So they don't have to deal with even semi-contested shots at the rim all that often. Now, depending on how Dallas ends up dealing with trying to keep Lively and Gafford at the rim,
Mm-hmm.
that's just going to be an interesting chess match, because I do
Yeah.
think that both Tatum and Brown are most effective when they can get downhill and finish there. Now, Tatum is a better playmaker than Jaylen Brown, but Jaylen Brown has had really good flashes in that respect as well. Like, he can really collapse a defense better than Tatum can, because I think most of the time teams are trying to like let Tatum be a scorer.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's what Dallas should do too, just like
Yeah.
they're
That's what I
gonna
was
do
just
with
gonna say.
Luka, because his shots are tougher. So he's a better shooter and like perimeter kind of creator than Jaylen Brown overall. But the shot diet, like
Mm-hmm.
I've said this before, like shot diet to me, efficiency is 80% shot diet.
Yeah.
And in these playoffs, Jaylen Brown has had the better shot diet because he's had more advantageous matchups as well, right? Like, I mean, the Cavs were giving up Darius Garland as like the sacrificial lamb just consistently in
Mm-hmm.
that series. And he was just getting downhill and finishing at the rim. Now, does Dallas let them do that consistently? Or do they try to make them playmakers? Do they try to make Lively and Gafford like recover more to make sure their shots at the rim get contested so that they're just a little bit tougher?
Mm-hmm.
Um
Or does Tatum do it to himself? Does he?
Tate, okay, so this I wanted to talk about, because even though Gafford didn't play too much in that regular season game, something that Dallas was doing a lot early was switching actions that involved Tatum and Kristaps, and switching the bigs out onto Tatum. Now, we talked about the ways that the Celtics attacked that by having Tatum post up, smalls, etc. But they also tried to have Tatum attack these bigs. Now, I think he got by Gafford once, but Gafford ended up blocking him at the rim. I actually think that Lively also holds up really well in switches in general. So they Mavs maybe aren't worried about Tatum as an isolation scorer. But the other thing that happened as the game went on, there was a later switch with Gafford, maybe toward the end of the half, and Tatum decided to take an early shot clock sidestep three. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're just doing this again. He
Yeah.
breaks it, of course. He wasn't shooting well in this game. Um, but that's the thing, is like Tatum's pull-up shooting is going to be another important element to counter this Dallas defense too, not just because like maybe they're going to want to play the bigs back a bit, but
Yeah.
also because they're going to try these switches and see like, okay, can you get by them? Now, again, there's a cost to that that has nothing to do with whether Tatum makes the shot, right? Because the Celtics can offensive rebound better when they've pulled the bigs away from the basket. I actually think Luka is going to play an important role, like similar to Tatum, in that Tatum is actually like the best rebounder on the team. I think Luka is the second best rebounder on his team after Lively, especially defensive rebounds. But he's on the floor more, so he often has more rebounds than anybody else. And the same with Tatum. So, like, part of their jobs is going to be to make sure that those defensive possessions get ended, even though the bigs have been pulled away from the basket or brought into the actions, right? That's something Dallas will have to deal with as a result of how they want to guard Jaylen and Jason.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
It's almost like a catch-22 because it's like they gotta guard the perimeter pretty well and try and be aggressive and push out the Celtics actions a little bit more so that it's not as easy on them. But you do want the bigs to have a chance to get rebounds and to protect the rim. So because like you got to be aggressive, like you got to put pressure. Not that I think they're like picking them up full court or anything, but like in the half court, you got to put pressure on Brown and Tatum. And I would try to like limit Brown as much as possible, like you're saying, and let Jason Tatum try to like win this series for them. Try to make him have to score, 30 or something a night and take pull ups, whatever you can do to deter him from just easily scoring at the rim or making easy reads. But it's hard because Celtics have shooters. They have ways to get you out of position. Which is why I'm basically thinking the Celtics are going to win ultimately.
He
Um,
said with a like disappointed sigh, even though he wants the Celtics to win.
Well, I don't want to sell. I'm picking the lesser of two evils from my perspective.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
fair.
yeah. I don't want either of these teams in this series, but I do think it is an interesting finals. Like, I'm not one of the fans who's coming in being, saying, because my team's not in it, this final sucks. Like, this is pretty cool finals. It's Luka and Tatum. I can't believe one of them is going to be a champion, and Kyrie could be a two-time champion, and it has the Kyrie Boston.
Drew could be a
Um,
two-time champion.
yeah, like it's pretty interesting if I just take my personal opinions out. I don't know if this is going to be the kind of series like the Nuggets Wolves, whether one side's playing well, it results in a blowout, or we'll see. I mean, I definitely could see the Celtics blowing out the Mavs in some games because they can just like get really hot offensively.
And I mean, the Mavs have been blown out multiple times throughout the playoffs at
Yeah.
this point. And the
So
Celtics have only been blown out once. I think it was just that one game against the Cavs that was a blowout.
I am interested to see how Lively holds up switching because I think the Celtics, I could see them underestimating him and thinking, yeah, we're
Yeah.
gonna get Lively one on one and we're gonna destroy him, and he does pretty good. But I could also see him, he's not gonna like win that battle every single time. These guys are elite offensive players, and he's still a rookie. But I think he'll do better than what a lot of people maybe expect. So he'll impress some people, and I think PJ is gonna guard Tatum a lot, though.
I think so too. I think that's the wrong thing to do. But so one counter to that, to that being the case, is that in that regular season matchup, I think Dallas did a lot more of Josh Green on Jason Tatum. So maybe they sort of understand this similar dynamic that we talked about with like generally just like keep a wing defender guarding this wing because he doesn't play
Hmm.
like a power forward most of the
Hmm.
time. And then keep your stronger player on Jaylen Brown. I didn't see Jaylen Brown attack PJ too much. The times that he
Hmm.
got downhill, et cetera, was like in transition and when he got like a cross match in semi transition, or maybe like Celtics forced a mismatch and then have him attack it in the half court. That's the other thing with this series is because of the way that both teams attack mismatches, these primary matchups are probably going to matter like 30% of the time. And 70% of the time, they're probably going to have other guys on them. But those possessions, like how you deal with that 30% of the time that the matchup that the other team wants on you is on you, are going to be interesting and potentially high leverage for both teams because those are the possessions we're going to want to keep, keep the matchups how they want them because they're trying to get a stop right there. So um, that's the other interesting thing about this series. So, like, the Celtics can hunt mismatches in lots of different ways by virtue of having so many different players that can sort of attack a mismatch. The Mavs can attack mismatches in so many different ways because of how versatile Luka and Kyrie are,
Yeah, it kind of runs through
right?
them, whereas everyone else
It's,
on the Celtics is like
yeah,
their own island or something.
exactly. So, yeah, while I think it
Yep.
feels more like Boston has this like overwhelming advantage in that sense because they have so many more people. I do think that the Mavs are versatile enough that they have a
Hmm.
chance in this series.
Yeah.
Do I pick them? We'll get there when we get to our predictions.
Well,
Oh,
just
yeah,
real
go
quick,
ahead.
both teams are going to be like tested in ways we haven't seen this postseason, which is cool because that's what the finals should be. These two top teams who are pushed to their extremes a little bit. We'll see who does better at getting into playing the way that they want to play, who's more comfortable, who's being put in uncomfortable situations, who's rising to the occasion. I mean, I didn't want to play Luka or Kyrie just because it was like sometimes no matter what you do, they just like find a way and make some tough shots. Like, and if they're doing that, and the Celtics have been known to drop some games. So do they drop a game and then Luke and Kyrie just win a game for you straight up? This series could be closer than what people are thinking. So,
I think that the series will be close if the Dallas defense somehow holds up against the Celtics. I think if the Dallas defense isn't doing anything with the Celtics, then they just have the edge because they have more shooting. I don't think that this Mavs offense is as potent, as it was when they had all these like 40% plus 3-point shooters. Their defense is much better. So that's the thing that has to hold up in order for them to stay competitive in this series.
yeah,
I,
it's
I
kind of
think
the
they
key
have ways
thing.
that they can do that. That they can maintain the defense even though Boston has a particular formula that makes the thing that the Mavs are best at on defense, which is the rim protection, I wouldn't say null, but it definitely reduces the overall impact on the
Hmm.
Celtics, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of what the thinking was behind getting Kristaps in the rotation, because he can pick and pop and he can make it so that if you're going to try to ice everything on Jason Tatum or put you on the ball, we're just going to get a lot of 3-point shots, right? I do think that a lot of the threes, like when I look at the film for the Celtics and their offense, like a lot of the threes that are more than the threes that other teams take aren't always because of like Kristaps taking a bunch of pick and pop threes and the way that other teams guard him. It's actually like they take a lot of early clock transition threes
Hmm.
that even in today's NBA, a lot of other teams don't take, even if they get them.
Yeah, Kristaps just fires them away, like, and you don't even expect it. You're just like, oh, okay, he's shooting now.
Yeah. The like I said, the Mavs transition defense has mostly like been like pretty good in this postseason. I do think that they'll need to cut down on the turnovers because they did turn the ball over, an okay, not like great amount, but it wasn't terrible in that regular season game. And they've been kind of a turnover machine in the playoffs, which is not really their MO. It's not Luka's MO, but he's faced a lot more. I don't even know if it's more ball pressure than the regular season because, like I said, he just gets blitzed so much already. But he needs to be better about taking care of the ball. That was one of the things that, I mean, some of those games they could have blown out the Wolves more than just in that game 5, but the Wolves were hanging around because they were getting easy offense off of those live ball turnovers from Luka, sometimes from other Mavs, but the ball is usually in his hands. So that's what, happens. He's going to have to be a really good decision maker to stay close in these games. Like what you can't do is give Boston easy stuff,
Hmm.
because
You have to
if
keep it
you
as
can if you
close as
can
you
force
can.
Boston into their tough shots, then you'll be able to stay in those games. They can hit those too. But the reason they are a historic offense is because they get really efficient shots. They get layups because of their spacing, and they get wide open threes because of their spacing, right? But you can't let them have, everything and runouts off of live ball turnovers, right?
Yeah.
So
And yeah, you're dead. You got to be like perfect everywhere almost. Like, because if they can keep it
almost, but you have to just
close,
not be like, don't be dumb.
well,
I
yeah,
don't
of
think you have
course,
to be
still be
perfect, but
dumb.
you have to not be dumb. Like don't let them have the easy stuff. That's just like
I mean, it's easier said than done. Sometimes it happens, and the Celtics are getting easy stuff and whatever. But they just got to keep it close because I could see them winning like in a close, tight fourth quarter game or a clutch situation, of course, because you got Kyrie and Luka, and I trust them to like
right.
hit some tough shots. Although Jalen Brown's been proving he could do it too, so it's not like I'm. mm, I don't know. You know how Matt Moore is on clutch stuff and how sometimes it can be
Oh
blown out
yeah.
of
I mean,
proportion.
it's
So,
just like who
but
executes. I think both teams
yeah,
are capable of it.
I just think
You know.
overall I can see like the vision of the Celtics and their path to winning this, which is obviously the case because it's the Celtics. They've been great all season, so it's easier to see how they're going to succeed on both ends. Whereas I think we have a lot of questions about the Mavs, like if they can do this and if they can find a way to do this, and I don't know
Right.
exactly how they get to that. I think game one could be a game where the Mavs can steal it because the Celtics, I feel like they could like lose in the feel out game and just like not be ready for certain situations and Luka and Kyrie just like destroying them, whereas they have a better chance to like adjust to it after reviewing and executing better. So I think this game one's going to be important for the Mavs, which usually isn't the case because it's like, hey, it's game one at home. Like, of course, the Celtics are going to win, but they should try to go in with the mindset that they need to get this one right now.
Yeah, I think someone was talking about how Jason Kidd usually loses his game ones, but then they ended up winning it in the Wolves series. Like, I think maybe he hadn't won a game one with like in Dallas, like since he started coaching there.
Hmm.
But they'd obviously won series, and it's like, well, they're the good adjustment team. But then Western Conference Finals comes around, and they have the matchup advantage, and they take the game one, they end up taking game two, etc. So, yeah, I think that you're right about that mindset thing. One of the impressive things about the Mavs offense, even though it hasn't been, supercharged in the playoffs, is that for the most part, like I talked about the number of times they've been blown out, but they never stop trying to like get back in the game. And that's the thing with
Yeah.
this Celtics team is they even in the playoffs, have had a tendency to let go of the rope a little bit once they get a lead. And so this Mavs team is not a team that's going to sort of just give up. They're going to keep executing
Yeah.
and keep trying to sort of keep it close, right?
Hmm.
So the Celtics are going to have to, keep working to like pull away with some of these games, and I think they probably will anyway. But that's just another sort of psychological dynamic to look out for in the series. And
Yeah.
the non-Tatum minutes in this regular season matchup that I watched looked really bad. Now, I think they ended up winning them overall in the second half because, like, I don't know, Jalen and like Derek White hit a couple of like semi-contested threes and kind of pushed out a lead that was already built further. But in the first half, like the Celtics looked horrific when Tatum was off the floor. And I'm like, I didn't understand why, because it wasn't like Tatum was not only was he not like scoring or like attempting shots that much in the first half, he wasn't even like involved in a lot of the actions. So I didn't
Hmm.
quite understand why when he was off the floor, the Celtics weren't just running the same stuff that they were when he was on the floor. Maybe part of it was like I think that they're probably going to try to keep one of or they should, if the Celtics should keep one of Tatum and Kristaps on the floor at all times, because then they
Hmm.
have like we have
Yeah.
a go-to, like we know what we're going to on this possession, regardless of like the outcome of it. Because when they don't have that, it looks rough.
Yeah. Which kind of leans into getting to this next segment where we're wanting to talk about the others and some other plays we haven't mentioned yet. I mean, we've talked about a ton of key factors, just talking about Luka, Kyrie, and the Jays because it all depends on who's being brought into these actions and what are the trickle down consequences of these choices. So we've talked about some players, but sometimes I think, regardless of the Celtics having, like you were saying, the next 3 through 5 players, if you're ranking them or whatever, on their starting five, I think their depth isn't as compelling um, against the Mavs. They're not horrible,
Right.
but like Horford,
Right. Against the
Pritchard,
Mavs.
those
I agree.
players, those like you're saying, like they're gonna need at least KP or Tatum out there because like I think they could really punish some of those other players. Like I think even just how's Horford gonna play? And I'm assuming KP's gonna be back and starting for game one. I don't know if they've
Yeah.
said that yet or not, but
It
if
hasn't been
Horford's
announced, but
yeah,
he's probably gonna play.
yeah, I would be surprised if he didn't because he was supposed to play in the last series. So, and there's been a ton of time between then and the final, so he should be like rested up and hopefully good as new, whatever, depending on who you ask. So yeah, there's just more questions with Horford and there's more questions with Pritchard. They're just less sound defensively. It's going to make it so much easier for Luka and
That's the
Kyrie if
other
that's the case.
reason I
So
think that the Celtics are just gonna like live with Luka scoring. Like in this game, they were totally fine with switching like Pritchard onto Luka, and he of course cooked that matchup.
yeah,
But the Celtics
it's
were just like, "What do you do?"
not an
I mean, he just
option.
bullied him and got like good shots too. It wasn't just like when he would get like a Conley switch like beyond the arc, he was shooting over him. Like no, he was bullying Peyton Pritchard all the way down to almost the paint, and hitting just like a little like banked like floater, like a little
Yeah.
6 foot shot. So I do think that that will end up. That's an interesting point that you make because if you'll recall, in the first regular season matchup in particular in Boston against the Nuggets, I don't believe Peyton Pritchard played in the second half. I think both teams sort of like pared down their rotations in the second half. Peyton Pritchard was getting pretty cooked by Jamal. So, imagine when that's Luka or Kyrie on him. If he isn't able to play in this series, it's going to put a lot more pressure on the Celtics ball handlers. They have a lot of them. They have Tatum, they have Brown, they have White, they have Drew, right? But Peyton Pritchard is like he acts like a Jaden Hardy. He can just kind of like let the stars and Derek White and Drew Holiday sometimes get off the ball and get into their sets that way. He is actually like a pretty good downhill force, whatever. He's a pretty good downhill guard. He can run some pick and roll, etc. Again, get the Celtics into their sets. And he just kind of takes that pressure off of them. But if he can't play in this matchup, that will put more pressure on the other ball handlers, and who knows what that means in terms of accumulated ball handling time over the course of a series. But again, they have multiple people that they can spread out that particular responsibility But I don't know that Sam Hauser is going to be viable at all in this matchup. He did not look good in the regular season game either. He was really getting picked on defensively, and I actually think that he's, like, pretty good when it comes to, like, isolation or whatever. But with the level of offensive talent that he's going to
Hmm.
be facing in this Mavericks
Hmm.
team, I don't think that he's gonna be viable defensively. And offensively, he has not looked comfortable hitting shots since round 2, in these playoffs. So, I'm curious if maybe he's sort of shaken it off by the time the finals start, but he's also dealing with an athleticism disadvantage, and when he isn't able to get to his spots quickly enough and, like, get the shot off, the Dallas defender has already closed out on him, whoever it is. Now, I do think that because of that, Hauser and Pritchard maybe being less viable, it's going to put a lot more pressure on Al Horford and Drew Holiday and Derek White to play big minutes and have big
Hmm.
impact consistently.
I don't know how the Celtics are viewing these other role players and if they're already of the mindset of limiting them a little bit or
Probably
expecting
not.
they're going to be played off the floor and or they're just going into it like, hey, we're going to do what we do, keep these playoff rotations the same. Let's see what you guys got against this team, etc. And whether the Mavs really punish that or not, we will find out the answer. But I do think like the Horfords and the, Hausers and such are just less reliable against the Mavs. So we'll see. And then on the Mavs side, with their other players, you're either gonna have openings for them, like we've been seeing, where Luka's gonna succeed in like creating opportunities for them because he's such a good creator, and they get these very high efficiency shots like open threes or lobs, which is what they want, or the Celtics are going to be so good, kind of locking down defense on these dudes, where it's going to be like a Wolves Nuggets situation where it's like we can't just get anything for these other dudes, and it's not a matter of just throwing them the ball and hoping they can create some stuff because that's not what you know. Although Lively is a pretty good passer and decision maker, it's not like he can't do that. It's not like he's just going to be
Yeah.
like a nothing if he's getting the ball. But
You just reminded me of one possession I recall when they have Lively catch on the short roll. They do collapse on him, but they almost sort of like hedge, and he's got Horford in front of him after he catches the ball, and then some Celtics maybe like fake like they're gonna blitz him, but then they recover back to their man, so he has nobody to pass to, and he just kind of gives Al Horford a bump and then hits this little baby hook. So I thought that was interesting. He had a couple of those shots in the OKC series because he wasn't able to get as much at the rim with Chet on the floor anyway. That's gonna be an interesting dynamic, I think, because even though they're not post-up threats, I do still think that the big spot is where Boston is their weakest,
yeah,
and, um, that means that Lively and Gafford have opportunities to use their athleticism to advantages that are to their advantage in those matchups, and when I say that, it's not about, again, not about posting up, but on the glass, on trying to finish through contact. It's not like when Kristaps is off the floor, they don't have a really great rim deterrent kind of presence. So even with Al there and he can block shots, like Lively is like jumping out of the gym to catch these lobs. I don't think Al
hmm
Horford's going to break up lobs, which is part of the reason I think that it's smart for the Celtics to keep Tatum on him. But the Mavs have ways that they can still win that matchup and punish that decision.
the Mavs really need to get to the things that they want to do. I mean, maybe it's just a question of asking Lively to show some skills that he hasn't really had to show, and he's going to live up to it and be this crazy X factor where he's like hitting these shots like Rudy Gobert
He'd have
style.
to compare his rookie season to, like, Tim Duncan if they actually won this finals, because it will be because he was an X factor, I
Hmm.
think, like, a bigger X factor than even I think after watching 3 rounds of him and, like, thinking he's awesome. Like, he would have
Hmm.
to really step it up to a degree I wouldn't expect against this Boston team,
I mean, he's
but
playing a
it's
bigger
still, like, a pretty
role.
good rookie season regardless.
I think he's going to be playing a bigger role in this finals as a rookie and coming off the bench than like Christian Brown was last year. Because it's
Oh,
like you would
absolutely,
love to
because
have your rookies
yeah.
get
I mean,
you won't
Lively is basically a starter, even though
yeah.
you won him in our bench draft.
So it's crazy that he is getting this experience in his first season. If there's a way that he's like limited or he struggled in this series, that's a good learning experience. Like he's gonna bring that into next season, and maybe he can work in a little post scoring skill into his game. I don't know. But if he could do that and just get some points on like Al Horford or on Kristaps, it's just gonna be huge for the Mavs, and I just don't know how reliable that's gonna be or not. We'll see how he does.
I do think it's interesting how we sort of started off our like playoff previews talking about like, oh, all these young players are going to be experiencing the postseason for the first time, blah blah blah. But I don't think either of us expected, really, just Derek Lively to have had this big of an impact through 3 rounds and getting his team to the NBA Finals. And part of that is because he is such a great fit with Luka offensively, but I mean defensively, again, like I'll like die on this hill. Like the Mavericks won round 2 with their defense primarily.
They're gonna have to win this
Um,
series with it too, I think.
I think so too, because like I said, the Celtics are really good at generating the easy stuff, which is what you need to do. But if the Mavs can take all of the easy stuff away, then they're going to give themselves a chance in this series because I think that they can still generate easy stuff even against good defense from Boston and they can hit the tough stuff. Not quite as much easy stuff, but it'll still be there for them. Were there any of the other role players that you wanted to talk about before we wrap this up
I don't think so. I mean, we
for
kind
either
of talked
team?
about Derek Jones Jr. He's been very effective for them. I just think it's like with the Mavs, you expect these other players to hit their open threes, even though they didn't shoot the greatest from three in the last series. Like they definitely can do it, but how many attempts are they even gonna get? If depending on how the Celtics decide to guard Luka, that's really my only thought with the Mavs role players. And like I said with the Celtics, I'm a little more
Yeah, the
skeptical
shooting.
of them, but they're more deep, I guess, in the classical sense and on paper. So
Yeah, I mean, it has been a sort of redemption postseason for Drew Holiday because he was known as this like big playoff dropper, especially with respect to his efficiency. But ever since round 1, which I don't think he had a great round 1, maybe mid round 2, he's been pretty efficient. And it's funny because I thought he would just be more efficient in this postseason than he had when he was, say, with the Bucks, because the shots he's getting in this Boston offense are way easier and more open. He's not like the number one sort of offensive guy or even the number 2 like he was in Milwaukee, but he was still sort of struggling through the first like round and a half to just kind of hit open shots. But he's been good since then. I mean, part of it is because it was the Pacers, but we'll see how he does against Dallas. I kind of again expect him to just be efficient and make good decisions. That's the thing that I think is, especially with Peyton Pritchard probably not being super viable in this series, more ball handling responsibilities for both Derek White and Drew Holiday. They're going to have to be good decision makers. I don't really worry about Derek White because he kind of already has a pretty big ball handling burden and handles it pretty smartly. But Drew, uh, like he is a point guard, but some of his decisions are a little bit questionable um, when he's forced to make tough ones. But that's the thing is in this offense, he's often a play finisher, and
mhm.
so he doesn't have to create bad shots, etc. I think that it'll be interesting to see if the Mavs are able to force the Celtics into questionable decisions in a way that they kind of have
Yeah,
against every team they've faced so far. And we talked about how Minnesota's offense is already kind of not the smartest, but like OKC had options in that series, but they weren't able to get their easy stuff. When that was taken away and they had to make decisions to create like they couldn't get the great shots, so they had to create like, good shots or decent shots. They weren't doing the right thing. I wonder, and the same thing with the Clippers. Like it started off like, okay, Harden is just torching these guys, making great decisions out of pick and roll, etc. But as that series went on, the the Dallas defense was smothering not only their ability to make shots, but also their ability to just run their offense in a way I didn't expect the Clippers to lose that series in that way, but that's what happened. So, the Celtics are a very different kind of offense, and it's sort of designed so that nobody ever has to really make a bunch of tough decisions because they have so much spacing, like, the next pass is always really obvious.
Yeah.
The shot that you're supposed to take is usually pretty obvious, but who knows what Dallas is gonna sort of cook up to try to disrupt that? That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah. I think also the Mavs are similar in that way where their shots and decision making is more obvious too. Like the role players know, like if the ball's coming to them and they're open, they're shooting it and they're not really like questioning it, or they're going, they're looking for the lob or whatever.
Or attacking the
Um,
closeout, right? Like,
yeah,
they know.
yeah. So that's good for them. And obviously, I don't have as many worries about them on offense, though the Celtics are great at defense. So it's not like, you know, they still have a challenge in front of them. But yeah, the Mavs, it really is about their defense. They're gonna have to find a way to slow them down. But they have so many options. Like yeah, just making that next pass, or it's a lot easier for them.
It's funny because I actually thought that going into the playoffs, I thought, okay, if Boston faces OKC, Denver, or Minnesota, or even the Clippers, the thing that would push the Celtics over the top against all of those teams is their defense, just because of the matchup. Like, I was envisioning what would happen. But against the Mavs, I actually think it's their offense that's just gonna work because I don't know that I've seen the Mavs defend at a high level in alternate schemes. Like, they can do things like switch Gafford lively onto the perimeter, but, like, and who knows, maybe, like, some of these double big looks will help with that because then you have, like, you're disrupting, like, multiple things at once without taking away that interior presence. And that's one of the things that was really sort of, like, scary when you're watching the Mavs and like, "Oh, they look scary in that Clippers series." We haven't seen too much of Kleba. He played a bit in the Wolves series when Lively was out, but since his shoulder injury, we didn't get to see too much of that look, so that's gonna be an interesting dilemma. But in between Kleba being out, etcetera, like, they've been able to defend at a high level in one look, and that's with Lively and Gafford, like, dropping. Sometimes they can switch onto the perimeter and get a couple stops that way, but the other team usually solves it pretty quickly, etcetera. So that, I think, is gonna be the question for Dallas. Like, can you actually defend at a high level in ways that are gonna take away what the Celtics do best without reducing, like, your impact on the thing you do the best, which is protecting the rim?
For fans looking at this series, Luka's playing like the best player right now, so I'm sure a lot of fans are thinking Luka's going to dominate, and he's going to be able to win this for the Mavs. But this is like a very complicated series. There's a lot of different players. The Celtics have tons of talent, so like I'm almost thinking about it as like a Cavs Warriors situation. Although both teams are like less like aren't as good as those teams, I
Right,
think.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think this Mavs team is better than the Cavs teams as a whole, even though Luka is not as good as LeBron.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because
Not
both of those
2016,
both
like,
those
but
teams
every
had
other
Kyrie, so
all
it's
those other
kind of
Cavs
funny.
teams. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
funny. Let's move on to our series predictions. We should talk about who you think's gonna win and in how many games. And if you wanna get spicy, you can say, like, which team's gonna win which games, but you don't have to.
Mm, okay. I'm gonna say the Mavs are gonna win game one, and then the Celtics are gonna win in six. So
Which
I don't
other
know,
game do you
like
think they lose? Do you think? Like, if you had to just guess which of the other
I
5?
think the Celtics would lose like one of the Mavs home games or something.
Mm.
Like I think they'll lose. I think they'll drop one of the first two home games and lose one of the Mavs home games. Like they'll win game two, win game three, lose game four, close the series out away.
Closed it out in Dallas?
Hmm.
Okay. So, I'm gonna go Celtics in 6 as well, just because I don't know which games they're gonna lose. Although I do think they're gonna lose game 2. I don't know which other one they're gonna lose. I think they're gonna lose game 2 because I think game 1 is gonna be a blowout win
Mm,
for the Celtics.
hmm.
I think that the Mavericks just get smarter as the series goes on. I think the reason that they won game 1 against the Wolves was because they had an immense matchup advantage in Luka. They didn't shoot well in that game. They defended well, but again, like, the Wolves offense plays directly into their scheme defensively. And the Wolves took so many threes in that game, and they made 18. Like maybe that's what this game ends up looking like in game 1, right? Like the Celtics shoot, let's say 38% from 3, as I think the Wolves shot like 37% in that game, but they took 49 threes. So they made 18, which is like a lot. And I think Dallas, they got outshot from 3 by like 30 plus points or something in that game 1. And I think that the way that Boston plays on offense is going to be a shock compared to the Wolves series for Boston or for Dallas. So they're going to
Yeah,
get
it's
blown
true.
out.
It's easier to get overwhelmed
Um,
with them.
yeah, Dallas or the Celtics are going to want to come out, make a statement at home, like show the fan base like
Hmm.
we're like
They
serious
are
this
pretty.
time all
They're
around.
rested up, but I guess everyone's kind of rested up. But the
Yeah.
Mavs less so.
But I do think that the Mavs are gonna lose game 1. I think they're gonna win game 2 just because they're gonna make adjustments. The Celtics will get comfortable because it was a blowout win in the first game, and they're gonna be maybe taken aback by a couple of the games that Dallas wins. Wouldn't it be super fun if Dallas won game 2 and then they won game 3 and went up in the series? Then the
Yeah,
Celtics are like, "Oh no, time to drop the hammer." Just
yeah,
narratively, I could see that being the case.
yeah. My predictions just. I'm trying to be spicy, saying they're gonna lose game 1, but I could see that happening too. I don't know. You get into all these kinds of scenarios where you're thinking, how is a team going to relax, and if they win this game, what will they think, and when are they going to turn on the Jets and win it? And series have
Yeah.
flows like that. I just don't know how exactly this one's going to go.
I do think that one argument for the Celtics losing game 1 is just Kristaps getting his sea legs back under him.
Yeah, that could be. They haven't played with him yet this postseason,
Right,
so.
exactly. So, that's one argument, but I just think that Dallas is the one that has more problems to solve, just like the Wolves
Hmm.
were the ones that had more problems to solve against Dallas. So I actually think game 1 is just gonna be full-on blowout. Um, Boston will be super locked in on defense because they wanna make a statement, and then their offense will just be clicking because they have the matchup advantage at baseline against the way that Dallas likes to defend. But yeah, I think that Boston has a significant edge in this matchup. They play a style that is very difficult to defend, and because of that, they actually can win this series with their offense, whereas I actually think they would have to win a series with their defense against almost any other, like, contender coming out of the West. So I think it's interesting that it was the Mavs that came out of the West, probably their best matchup of any again, of any of the top 5 teams. I don't know who's gonna play better between, like, Tatum, Brown, and even Derek White. I don't know who's gonna win Finals MVP, but maybe it's Drew. Maybe Drew Holiday is gonna be the Finals MVP. Al Horford's gonna be a champion, and if they don't win this, it's gonna be slander, the summer of slander, if the Celtics don't
Yeah.
win this championship.
For me, it's just a win-win scenario because either the Celtics win, and that means Luka and Kyrie and the Mavs lose, which I personally don't love, or if the Celtics lose, then everyone gets to joke and clown on them for losing when they had everything on their side. Because yeah, they have history on their side. Like everything you're looking at saying this should be a Celtics finals win, even coming into the playoffs, that's what it was saying. And the Mavs have history against them. It's not like they have the history against them because the Celtics have it for them. It's they already have the history against them in a vacuum because they're not a 3 seed. Like there's all these things you can go down and say no team has won because of this and this reason. But they had that midseason trade, so it is kind of hard to fit them in that mold because they've improved quite a lot with these trades. So maybe this is the exception where they finally get over the edge because of these trades, and you can't look at them like the typical 6 seed or whatever the hell they ended up being.
They're a 5
So
seed. It's
yeah,
the West. They were still a 50-win team. That's
yeah,
that's pretty good. I think a 50-win team is a great team, and when you consider the fact that they were a play-in team up until the trade deadline in terms of seeding, the fact that they were able to string together so many wins and be as dominant as they were and climb out of that play-in range and get up to 50 games won, in this Western Conference, like that part I think is still impressive. So I wouldn't look at the seeding so much as the play. Like they still like have struggles. Like they were a really good offensive team even before the deadline, but the deadline moves and the way that they play has favored more defense, but their offense has definitely suffered. And that's why I'm looking at this finals and thinking they have to win this on their defense because their offense is not as potent as it used to be. There's that. But then Boston, against anyone else, I would say, I think they get defended pretty well against this matchup. So they would have to win on their defense against not anyone else, but anyone else in the top 5 in the West. But in this matchup, I think their offense is going to be largely clicking unless Dallas figures something out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Like you said, there's all these ifs and contingencies for what Dallas would have to do. I think that the Celtics just have more ways that this could go
Yeah.
and they still win.
Also, just from like a personal level, and this is why I am rooting for the Celtics, is because I don't really want Kyrie to win another championship. Don't really want Luka to win a championship yet. There's Nuggets fans who are excited for Luka to win one because him and Jokic are such good friends, and they have the European like Balkan brother connection, which is really cool. So if he does win, I'm not going to be angry about it. I just have less agendas that would be ruined by the Celtics winning. I feel like because the Tatum MVP stuff's done. Jokic has won all his MVPs. Don't really care about like how people view Tatum at this point. Boston's kind of like a powerhouse. I feel like it fits into everyone picked them to win regardless already coming to the season, so it wouldn't be like surprising at all. I feel like I can live with the Celtics winning and just be like, yeah, whatever. But if the Mavs win, it's just harder for me to swallow personally, on a personal level. But if
Yeah,
you
I
want to
mean,
share any of
I
your
can
feelings,
understand where you're coming from, but I cannot condone any outcome that results in Boston winning another championship. Boston
I
is the
know,
city. Obviously, the
yeah,
Celtics haven't won a chip in like a while, and like they're due. And I don't have any like personal like problems with this Celtics team. Like we talked about this on our agenda episode, like I do with some of my other anti agendas. But I just love to hate, and I hate Boston. So that's where we're at right now. I would not be like devastated if Boston wins. Like that's what's going to happen. And I've sort of come to I feel like I'm at peace with that outcome. However, I will be so happy if they lose.
it will be fun
Like,
still. Like I'll still like have a lot of fun with that if they end up losing.
Twitter will
So
be more fun if Boston loses
it's true.
the
That's
championship.
true.
So,
I'm personally also not invested in the like Lakers and Celtics banner race.
yeah, I don't care
Like
about that.
I like LeBron as so and he's on the Lakers, but I don't care about who gets to 18. It doesn't matter to me. So that
I mean, the
yeah,
LeBron tie is more like Boston has been his like nemesis for like his entire career, whether he was in the East and now in the West, just because he happens to be on the Lakers and those franchises have sort of beef or whatever. But yeah, my personal animus, like I said, toward Boston as a franchise, not this like current iteration of the team, certainly stems from
back
those
in the day.
recurring battles between LeBron and the Celtics when he was in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
I just think that it's going to be a really interesting finals. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, like you said, it is competitive. I think the games will be more competitive than people think, but Boston like wins a lot of these margins just because of their talent. But the Mavs are going to be able to win some of the margins too, because I do think that they have an interesting roster build that has certain advantages. But like I opened the show saying, you have to be good enough at the thing that creates the matchup problem in order to fully, and consistently exploit that over the course of a series. And like to me, it's the bigs. Are Lively and Gafford going to be good enough to consistently exploit that matchup advantage? And is it going to be enough ultimately to counter everything Boston has? Probably not,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it'll be
It's a
interesting to
tall
see.
order. But it will be fun. Thank you for listening if you've made it this far. It's the final, so it's time to dig in and enjoy if you're a basketball fan, unless you're still salty that your team didn't win. Um, but otherwise, remember to like and subscribe. We're still trying to grow this. The playoffs are almost done. We're almost
Okay,
crowned a
good.
champion. This is our first time covering the playoffs, and so it's been a lot of fun. So share and hit the notification bell and leave reviews wherever you're watching or listening. And remember, winning is so much fun and losing really sucks.
It really, really does.